Science is a wonderful tool to help humans advance their technology and to find out more about how the natural world works. The more one looks at science, the more they notice a grand design involved. Science has helped us create devices, like lights, that we can turn on and off. Science has helped us improve our medicines, and has benefited the Western worlds in more ways than one. However, especially in recent years, people seem to have gotten carried away with how amazing science can be. This isn't hard to imagine why, after all, science has done so much. But there's something I want to make aware of in this video, that as great a tool as science is, it cannot explain everything. Lately, people seem to have been thinking that science is omnipotent, like a god. But people have failed to realize that science has its limits too, especially empirical science. Science can answer questions like when and how, and occasionally the who questions with stuff like DNA being left behind in some objects. But science cannot answer questions of why. Say I'm making a cup of tea, for example. You can explain how water is essential to make the tea in the first place. You can explain how the plug points empower the energy and heat necessary to make the water boil. You can scientifically analyze how the water is boiling and how it's initiated in the flick of a switch. You can scientifically analyze how this top was put on top so that the water would be guaranteed to keep on boiling. With science, you can do all that. But if you were a scientist who thought that science could answer everything, you're probably going to stumble and be baffled at why. Sure, you could find my fingerprints on the handles of the kettle, but in order to find out why, I would have to tell you in person. I would have to tell you I'm the one who made the kettle boil because I wanted a cup of tea. So you see, inevitably, there comes a sort of personal testimony. See, as well as scientific reasons, there's also the personal reasons of why. It's much like receiving a written letter. You could analyze the paper, you could look at the writing, but if you were to look at the letter on a strictly scientific basis, there's going to be some serious limits. At one point, you're just going to have to read the letter, and then come to the personal revelation that that letter was sent by someone as a means of sending their love and regards to you. Science also cannot explain abstract realities like truth and morality and logic and mathematics, because the scientific method is limited to what we can physically see, hear, smell, touch, and taste. Yet the realities of truth and morality and logic and mathematics exist outside the physical senses. So on a strictly physical basis, science is by very definition limited. Allow me to explain more about these abstract truths. When it comes to morality, you can scientifically analyze why cyanide can kill a person, but you cannot scientifically analyze why it's morally wrong to do so. You can scientifically analyze how the poisons infect the body and how the toxins melt away at your organs, poisoning every inch of you. But science cannot explain why it's wrong or why it's right. Science is, for lack of a better word, indifferent. To make some real-world comparisons, Nazi scientists who experimented on Jews and tortured them, all in the name of scientific progress. Scientifically speaking, you can't explain why that's wrong. Morally speaking, you can explain why it's wrong to torture others in the name of science. To justify and explain moralities, you'd need a justice system. And it's through justice that you're able to explain morality. We see this sort of thing all the time in the fictional media. You know, the stereotypical scientist who gets so carried away by their studies, they're willing to sacrifice their morality to advance in the name of science. You know what I'm talking about. Characters like Ash from Alien, spoilers, or Moira from Overwatch. To explain other things that science cannot explain, yet we all rationally hold dear, I'm going to quote professional philosopher William Lane Craig. In a debate, he said, "I think there are a good number of things that cannot be scientifically proven, but we are all rational to accept." And then he listed 5 examples. Number 1. mathematics and logic. Science can't prove them because science presupposes them. Number 2, metaphysical truths, such as there are minds that exist other than my own. Number 3, as mentioned before, ethical judgments. You can't prove by science that the Nazis were evil because morality is not subject to the scientific method. You have to presuppose all of these in order to do science in the first place. Number 4, aesthetic judgments. The beautiful, like the good, cannot be scientifically proven. And, ironically, number 5, science itself. The belief that the scientific method discovers truth can't be proven by the scientific method itself. You see, the scientific method of searching for causes by observation and repetition is but one means of finding truth, not the end-all be-all. It's not the only means of finding truth. In fact, there are some scientists who hold on to a worldview called scientism, a worldview which dictates that science can explain everything. But can science explain that? Can you scientifically analyze that claim you're making? Unfortunately, you cannot, because that is a philosophical claim, not a scientific one. So, scientism, by its very definition, contradicts itself. Professional speaker Frank Turek once said, "Science doesn't explain anything. Scientists do." Science is not telling us anything. It's the scientists who are interpreting where the science is leading towards. You see, anyone of any belief can do science. We all have the same evidence. But there are other methods of finding truth, not just scientific, but also archaeological, documentational, historical, eyewitness accounts. In fact, we can't really find empirical evidence of deceased people from long ago. Yet we all put our faith in historical documents that the events that those people partaken in really occurred. And there's one last thing I want to say about science. All of our modern science today indicates that the universe had a definitive beginning. People used to think the universe was eternal, but science proved otherwise. Now think about this for a moment. All of us can agree that if the universe had a beginning, then whatever created the universe also created the sciences, including empirical science. If we are trying to find out what created the universe, with the implications of it having a beginning, shouldn't we be stepping outside the restrictions of empirical science to find out what created it? Now, if any of you watching this are indeed scientists, all the best for your scientific discoveries. Because it may be you'll find a truth more profound than you could have ever realized.